I found an interesting survey from SIEM users I thought I'd share with you. Now SIEM, SIEM, stands for Security Information and Event Management. This survey, I think, is very telling for people who are considering implementing a SIEM in their own organizations. Now, as an overview, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the source of the survey, because I think it's always important to understand who's conducting the survey and what biases they might have and how the survey was actually conducted. Then we'll take a look at some of the survey results, including the general security posture that the respondents reported, what they saw as the benefits of a SIEM, the top threats that their SIEM detected, and key integrations that they relied on for their SIEM performance, and then lastly some of the challenges that they encountered, and we'll talk about how to maybe solve some of those challenges. And then we'll talk outside of the survey about some buying considerations that I would recommend you consider prior to making a SIEM purchase. So real quickly, my background in technology is preceded by a background in marketing. So I've consumed a lot of marketing research in the past. So I think it's always important to understand the source. First of all, this survey and the report was published by a company called Core Security. You can go to their website and you can download their Cybersecurity Insiders 2021 SIEM report. Now, you have to register for it, but if you're interested in purchasing a SIEM, I think it's well worth it. We're going to go through some of the highlights, but certainly not all of the information that's included in that report. Importantly, their survey includes responses from 267 security and information management user respondents, or SIEM users. And this is really important. As a former marketer and a consumer of marketing research, the sample size is very important when you're looking at results to understand whether or not those results are attributable to a larger universe or population of potential users. Now, 267 survey respondents is actually a pretty small sample size. However, it's pretty consistent with what we see industry-wide. People generally don't like talking about their security posture, and so Core Security's ability to get 267 security leaders to respond to their survey is actually a pretty good accomplishment. So I'm pretty happy with that survey size, with that respondent population. One of the things that we also have to recognize is Core Security sells SIEM services, so they are not an unbiased survey organization. They are they're certainly in the business of having positive results, or would hope to have positive results out of this survey. So we have to take the results with a little bit of grain of salt, a little bit of skepticism. But I'll point out in a few areas where the results really seem to validate what I've seen in the marketplace in terms of marketing research, and why I'm comfortable sharing this with you. I think it's a pretty valid survey. So in terms of the overall importance of a SIEM, 74% of the respondents said a SIEM was extremely important. However, 80% of the respondents, just 6% more, said the SIEM was effective in identifying and remediating cyber threats. So, and 6% of the people out there said it was effective, but don't consider it extremely important. What I think is really interesting here is this 80% number. 80% believe a SIEM is effective in identifying and remediating cyber threats. What I've learned and what I've experienced in my over a decade in marketing and working with market researchers is that you will never get a 100% or even close to 100% positive to any question. There will always be a certain subsegment of your survey base or your respondents who will respond negatively or against the norm to almost any question. So 80% is actually a really high number, because there's always 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people out there who, for whatever reason, will respond in an opposite direction, even if they are enjoying the services. They might have had an issue recently, for example, or they may think that their SIEM isn't doing enough for them, for example. It still may be important, but it's not 100% effective, so they're not going to answer positively. So 80% is actually a really strong number from my experience. So let's get into some of the detailed survey results. And the purpose of what I've pulled out of this report is to really provide you a platform when you're considering acquiring a SIEM to evaluate your use cases and what type of SIEM experience you want to have. And I've also, throughout the rest of this video, I've deleted the response percentages in the report. You can go to the report and actually see how many people responded, or what percentage of the respondents responded to each of the individual bullets. But the way the survey was communicated was a little bit confusing. In some cases, it appeared as though they asked for one response to a question. So the responses added up to 100%. In other questions, it looked like it was more of a multiple choice, where you could answer maybe top 3 or something like that, where the responses added up to more than 100%. So the responses that I've got in this video are simply the rank order of the responses without the percentages, because I actually thought as I was building this deck that including the response numbers or the response percentages was more confusing than it was clarifying. So let's talk about some of the benefits that these respondents saw in their SIEM. SIEM are great to gain visibility into threats. They provide a attack chain, if you will, that will identify various hosts that might have come into contact with the malicious activity that was going onto your network. It also gives you faster detection and response capabilities, and we'll get into a little bit of that. One of the survey responses dives a little bit deeper into that in just a moment. You get more efficient security operations because you have a platform that's directing your remediation, your investigation and remediation activities. You become much more efficient. These SIEMs also have playbooks that they will provide to you when they've identified the type of threat that you've encountered. They'll provide you a playbook to help you remediate. That increases efficiencies dramatically. You'll get better threat analysis. That playbook and that threat library will help you understand where that threat might have come from, how it might have propagated throughout your network, and help you remediate that in a much more effective manner. It'll also reduce your staff workload. Everything I've just expressed is all about saving time and energy and increasing your response time. It will provide you great reporting on your threat management, which will lead to a better compliance posture. Now, we have clients who are implementing SIEMs primarily for compliance purposes. They're not necessarily doing a lot of threat hunting on their network. That's a good alternate or alternative benefit from the SIEM, but they have to implement a SIEM to comply with various security frameworks or compliance frameworks that they are required to follow. Now lastly, 84%, this goes back to the timing, and I have added a number here because I think it was an important number to include. 84% of the respondents that were included in this survey indicated that their SIEM detected a breach within minutes or hours. That's a huge improvement over manually detecting threats outside of a SIEM environment. Reducing the dwell time of a malicious actor within a network really reduces the amount of time, effort, and damage that a bad actor can cause and result in terms of a breach. Okay, so what types of threats were detected? Well, unauthorized access was the top ranked threat that was detected, followed by malware. DDoS attacks actually were number 3 in rank order of threats detected. Insider attacks, both malicious and careless. I always get uncomfortable when I talk about insider attacks because there are very few people within your organization that are actually malicious. The vast majority of insider attacks are actually just carelessness, but they're called insider attacks, implying some level of intent, which I don't really think is there the vast majority of the time. And then hijacking accounts or systems. So if these are the types of threats that you're concerned about within your organization, a SIEM can definitely help improve your security posture. Some of the systems that were used to feed the SIEM information were intrusion detection and protection systems, endpoint protection, firewall, anti-malware, and anti-ransomware. Now, you might say endpoint protection is anti-malware, anti-ransomware. If you've seen my EDR video, you know that that's actually not correct. There are 2 different categories. They are merging right now, but there are 2 different categories. Anti-malware, anti-ransomware is a traditional signature-based protection, endpoint protection is more behavioral, and today those two categories are merging in an endpoint detection and response category. But today most people still have separate solutions for endpoint protection and anti-malware and anti-ransomware. Applications were also included in terms of feeding the SIEM, as well as the vulnerability management platform. Now, from a challenge perspective, SIEMs are hard. I'm not going to doubt that. The reason why most medium and small businesses don't have SIEMs is because they don't have the skilled staff required to manage a complex security platform like a SIEM. You have to frequently manually create rules. Now, what do we mean by manually creating rules? Well, let's say that within your organization, your security posture, you wanted an alert anytime someone had elevated permissions that weren't on a certain access list. That's not something that the SIEM is going to come with out of the box. That's a rule that you're going to have to create and configure within the platform. And that's where the lack of trained or skilled staff comes in. And sometimes these platforms can be very complex in terms of creating manual rules or manual correlations. Lack of budget is a big one. If you've looked at a SIEM a couple years ago, you would have seen a very, very steep price point even for a smaller organization. Today, however, SIEMs are actually a lot more affordable because there's a lot more competition, and some of the newer entrants have really taken more of a value stance in the marketplace. Now, too many false positives leads to alert exhaustion, and that's been a huge issue with SIEMs, where people have implemented SIEMs and then they get inundated with all of these alerts, and their security operations team simply can't keep up with them. The number of actionable alerts is actually such a small percentage that people just get exhausted of chasing down all of the false positives. And then poor integration. We talked about the various systems that are used to feed the SIEM. If you're not comfortable creating those integrations, you're going to have substandard results. That's why within our own practice, we recommend people use a SIEM with a managed service provider, someone who is expert in managing that particular SIEM platform and are skilled at doing the integrations. They've done them many, many times over, have a deep bench of trained and skilled staff people. They can create these rules in their sleep. So considering now that the price points have come down dramatically, using a managed service provider who knows a particular platform inside and out is really, really a great way of approaching a SIEM type of service. Now, before you buy, and this is where I'm stepping away from the survey here, this is my own opinion, as was the part about the managed services. Before you buy, you really need to understand that SIEMs have evolved tremendously over the past couple of years. They're incorporating more and more of a category referred to as threat detection, which is a behavioral analytics way of discovering potential malicious activity on your network. A traditional SIEM is more signature based, using threat intelligence databases to see if something that is on your network has been discovered as malicious before and has been published in this database. But today, with the polymorphic aspects of the threats and the huge number of zero-day threats that are out there, the chance that your particular threat or breach will be in a threat intelligence database is getting lower and lower by the day. So you need something out there looking at the behavior of your network and detecting abnormal behavior before something might actually be revealed through a signature. So when you're looking at a SIEM, you have to be really careful and make sure that you understand what the history is of the artificial intelligence and machine learning platforms that feed that threat detection, behavioral analytics type of analysis. You have to understand those stories very critically before you make your purchase, because not every SIEM has been able to add those capabilities at the same time and at the same pace as other platforms. The last thing I'll also add about the purchase is that you really want to have a clear understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, because the SIEMs, while they've been in the market in many cases for more than a decade, are still very different in terms of what they deliver to the organization and how they do so. And certainly if you're going to look at a managed service provider, you're going to want to understand what their capabilities are as well. So here are a couple of logos that we cover in our portfolio. Now, we're not a managed service provider. We're a neutral consulting organization that provides free consulting to help people understand what they can choose in the marketplace, and then we help to acquire those. I'd be happy to explain our business model, but it is in fact a free consultation service if you want to take us up on that. In fact, in terms of next steps, we'll get into that right now. Feel free to reach out to me and let me know if you are considering a SIEM and if there's anything that we can do to help you without charge to evaluate the marketplace. And if you got some value out of this video, I'd really appreciate a like. And thank you very much in advance for doing that. And if you want to find your way back to this channel, the best way of doing that is just by clicking that subscribe button. That will put us or this channel in your feed, and you'll be able to find your way back here at your convenience. And with that, I appreciate your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. Take care.